Hi, good afternoon. My name is Joseph Mello, Director of the Vanderbilt University Fine Arts Gallery. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's painting demonstration and discussion, an extension of the exhibition at the Vanderbilt Fine Arts Gallery titled America Creative, Portraits by Everett Raymond Kinstler. When you get done with today's program, the gallery will be open till 5 p.m. and again from tomorrow from 1 to 5 as well. I highly recommend, if you haven't seen the show, to come by. When Everett recently described his dear friend Tony Bennett as one of a dying breed, it made me think of Kinstler himself. As I note in the catalog, here is a man who has witnessed the better part of a century and has come in contact with many of its most prominent individuals, be they heads of state, writers, actors, artists, composers, musicians, educators, and more. It has often been said, it has often been observed, should I say, that Kinstler is a storyteller and truly one of a kind when he approaches his stories. His keen ability to connect with his subjects, to have them open up and tell their stories, is a special quality that has resulted in his portraits carrying the sitter's personality forward to great effect. Through his singular vision, he's provided America with a creative record second to none. Kinstler has more portraits in the National Portrait Gallery than any other living artist today, numbering over 140 works of art. No small accomplishment, to say the least. For those of you who are fortunate enough to have attended the conversation between Kinstler and Michael Shane Neal Thursday evening over at Lipscomb University, I think you would have to agree that Kinstler's honesty, compassion, hard work, and natural inherent skill is a model for all artists in how to live a creative life. For us, we are truly lucky to experience this vision, and for that and much more, I'm hugely appreciative and humbled. Thank you, Everett.
Thank you. More.
What was that? I can't see him, so I'm kind of, shooting in the dark here, literally. Oh, there he is. I just want to make a few more comments. As I'm sure many of you are aware of, exhibitions and programs like this are with loans from the National Portrait Gallery, the National Academy Museum, the Butler Institute of American Art, the Museum of the City of New York, the Hood Museum at Dartmouth, the National Arts Club, the Players Club, the Harvard Club, certainly the artist himself, is a huge endeavor. Close to 50 donors came forward to make this exhibition and companion catalog and today's event possible. And from the bottom of my heart, I truly thank them, and I'd like to give them a round of applause. Several are here today. Of course, I'd like to thank the artist himself, naturally, my good friend Everett Raymond Kinstler, and now, of course, his subject today, former star running back for the Tennessee Titans, Eddie George. Thank you so much, Mr. George.
Thank you. Thank you.
Additionally, I want to thank the College of Arts and Science here at Vanderbilt, and in particular Bonnie Dow, Dean of the Humanities, for her support. And finally, I'd like to thank, before I forget, I'd like to thank Peggy Kinstler, who throughout this process has played such a huge role in bringing this exhibition and project to fruition. Thank you, Peggy. And finally, Margaret Walker, the other half of our two-person staff at Vanderbilt Fine Arts Gallery. Margaret Walker, thank you. And finally, Philadelphia over there, and that dog. I'm trying to keep on good terms with them. Thank you so much. And without further ado, we're going to leave it over to these two gentlemen on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. First, I want to be sure that Mr. George's mic and mine are working. Are they? Well, yeah. I'm a little bit disappointed because I thought everybody was coming for me, and I found out nobody knows I'm here, but it's all because of Eddie George. So I have to swallow a great deal, and thank you for my new friendship.
Not a problem.
I have, Eddie asked me an interesting question, how I go about painting portraits, and I said, not this way. And let me explain what I mean quickly. I'm taking the name of someone who's well known because if I say Bill Smith, they're not going to know. But in 1977, a year before he died, and he's dead now 35 years, I was commissioned to go out to California to paint John Wayne. And I, of course, grew up watching John Wayne, and there was no idea in my mind except the cowboy. And the word I want to use, which is very important for me, is the word homework. It's something, as a high school dropout, I learned very early on. Do your homework. So when I got to paint John Wayne, I had no other idea except to paint him as a cowboy. And suddenly, as it must be with you now acting, you begin to focus on your lines. And while I knew what he looked like, suddenly when I was sitting next to him, and he was sitting this way with me, my mind was moving very differently. And this has got to do with football. I noticed, and I began to play a lot of his movies, that he often stood like this. Now, you were what, about 6'3"?
Yes, sir.
Well, he was 6'4", but you would have looked small next to him.
Well, I'm 6'3.5".
When you came in this evening, you were 6'3".
Well, on a good day, I'm 6'3.5".
You won't believe what height you'll be when you leave here. Anyway, I was with him. He was really very big in the sculptural sense of not lean and trim, but he was like a piece of sculpture. But I noticed in the movies, he would stand like this, and I think part of it, his trunk was very large, and it was almost to support this weight of the upper body. And I watched him, and as he walked around a lot, he would stand like this with his hands like that. If you watch any of his movies, it was something from the early movies, and I said to him, because Eddie had asked me how I paint a portrait, I'll see if this touches on it. I said, I noticed, Mr. Wayne, you always stand with your hands on your hips. I said, I watched it through 30 years of your movies. And I said, right now, as you are talking to me, you're doing this. And he said to me, well, that comes from my football days. We used to wait for a play, and we had no pockets. Well, that became a characteristic with him in the movies. About 2 months ago, I was painting a portrait of a man named Joseph Dunford. He was a general, a former commandant of the Marine Corps. He's now chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And I was with him in the studio for an hour and a half. And he said, he was a lovely gentleman, handsome, well-spoken, real gentleman. And he said, Ray, when do you paint? Because I talked to him for an hour and a half. And I said, as we have been here for an hour and a half, I'm painting. And when I was looking at Eddie at one point, I don't get someone in my studio and sit down and just say pose. You were sitting, and one moment you did this, and I thought, that could be a painting, that could be a painting. So there is a nature within this, and I take it very seriously, of a stunt. For instance, in my show, for those of you who saw it, there was a little pencil drawing of Katharine Hepburn. That was part of my homework, part of what goes into making a picture for me. I don't think it's my role to judge. In other words, what you see in a portrait, I'm not trying to make a statement of like or dislike. I hope what comes across is something honest. I see myself in a way, as I see you, as an actor. I have a role to play. I want to give it my best shot. And what you see in it is up to you. For instance, I may have mentioned this, and forgive me, but I've had people come up to me and say, oh, I could tell you didn't like Bill Clinton. I said, really? How did you determine that? Well, they said, we saw your portrait of him, and we could tell you didn't like him. I've had an equal number of people come up to me and say, oh, you liked Bill Clinton. I said, how do you know that? We saw your portrait of him. So I think in a way you're going to see in a painting, any painting, a little bit of the artist and the actor, of taking your lines. I was so fascinated in meeting Eddie that I don't know how many of you know this, but he is, and I wish I could have seen it, he's done Chicago, which is that great musical, playing Billy Flynn, Razzle Dazzle, right? And what interested me, and I think you all have got to be, tell them what you're going to be doing next.
Going to a football game?
No.
No.
Oh, yeah, that'll have to do.
Yeah,
we've got to get him out at 4 o'clock because his son is playing over here.
Yeah, it's his 21st birthday today, so
We can't miss that. No, but tell them if you will, because you made the transition from sports, and I haven't painted many sports figures. I painted Tommy Lasorda, I painted Arthur Ashe. I painted a great golfer named Byron Nelson and a boxer named Barney Ross. But one thing was clear to me, that at a certain age, not Tommy so much, you're an athlete, your body doesn't do the things it would. Now, I feel as a painter, you as an actor, there's no reason why, if your brain is working, this little toy and your heart, that you can't continue forever. Right. I was talking about Chris Plummer, whose portrait I did as Prospero, and he's about my age, and he was saying that he's having a little problem from time to time remembering lines, and he was saying that at the age of 88 or 89, which he is, I guess, he said, I played Hamlet 50 years ago, and he said, now I know how it should be interpreted, but I'm too old to do it. Tell them what you're going to be doing next. Theatrically.
Yeah, I'll be doing Chicago, and then in October I'll be doing a reading of Richard III.
Richard III.
Yes, and yeah, you say, oh God, how's it going to pull it? No, but I've done Julius Caesar a couple years back here in Nashville, and Othello, I think in 2012, and I love Shakespeare. That's how I got into it about 13 years ago. My wife and I were actually at a play in New York City to see.
If you look towards me, just as
Hamlet.
That's great, thank you.
It's good. And Jude Law was the lead actor in the play, and it was much like this. It was dim, it was dark, and it was my first Shakespearean play as a viewer. And I'm thinking, okay, I just want to at least say I had the opportunity to see a Shakespeare play. I didn't expect anything of it. So I got my pillow, I got a glass of wine. My wife's here tonight also. She's like, with her hand on her, on her face. I'm thinking we're both going to nod off. And
if you just look towards me as you're talking.
Yes, sir.
No, please talk to them, but.
Okay. I thought I was going to nod off. And to my surprise, as soon as the lights went dim, some smoke came out onto the stage, and immediately I was captivated by how they brought this poetry to life. And I couldn't understand a word they were saying. I had no idea until about 30 minutes into the play, where it's the King's language. You kind of figure things out as you go. But I said, that's what I want to do. I really want to do that. And my wife looked at me and said, please, you can barely speak the English language, let alone Shakespeare.
If you just make sure you keep.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, thank you.
So, yeah, this is going to be a challenge to talk. Yeah, that was it. That was my first love in terms of theater, and I just continue to.
When did you first get interested in theater?
It was after I finished playing. I was 31 years old, and I retired in 2005. And it was.
What year did you retire? I'm sorry.
In 2005. And I was looking for my next thing in life, and I was commentating at the time. I was getting some auditions, but it was going so bad. I said, I can't. I got to figure out a way, if I'm going to do the acting piece, I got to learn from the bottom up. And I sought out an acting coach and jumped into theater, started doing various plays, started reading different scripts, started writing myself, and and by doing that, I found a way of kind of healing myself from how.
What was the word you used?
Healing.
Healing.
Yes, because the game of football was very much a part of my life. I mean, it was everything that I knew up until that point, and it was time to make a shift in my life to go from a completely different career, discipline, day-to-day life, and now try to find something that was new. And the arts, stop it. Talking to my dog. The arts was a lifeline for that. It was therapeutic.
Had you taken theater or Shakespeare in college?
No. I was a landscape architect major. So,
really?
Yeah.
Really?
Y'all laugh. I had my own business for about 14 years. I had my landscape architecture firm, the Eds Group, for 15 years, and that was my first, my degree in that was from Ohio State, the Ohio State University. And then I got my MBA from Kellogg School of Management. And yeah, so here I am.
How long, when did you first do Chicago?
I did Chicago in 2000, was it 18, 15? Was it 16? 16, yeah, 2016. And when I started my acting classes, believe it or not, my acting coach, God bless her soul, Anna Maria Franzella.
This was where? At
in Nashville. Mm-hmm. And she wanted me to sing. And I mean, I had to take voice lessons. I was doing voice lessons. And
were you what, a tenor?
I don't know. What am I? Baritone? I still don't know what I am.
6'3½".
Yeah. My wife is the singer in our family.
Really?
That's what she does, yes. Okay, I know. Let her up on stage. Come on. This is my baby girl. This is Philadelphia. Good to see you. She's my baby. I know. All right. Okay, just stay, not here. Oh God, you made me lose my train of thought. Anyway, yeah, so she wanted to hear me. She wanted to hear me sing, and I could hold a couple notes here or there. And she said, you would make a great Billy Flynn one day. And this was in 2006. So I said, whatever, lady, let's just get on with the acting lessons and just work on my voice, so I have my speaking voice and so forth. But as time went on, one of the songs that we kind of worked on was All I Care About Is Love.
Oh, yeah. Was that Billy Flynn?
That's Billy Flynn.
Yeah.
That's the opening number. And no. That's my wife that's told me to sing it. She's also my coach. But it was in 2014 that I actually went up to New York to audition for the role of Billy Flynn. And how that all came about, I was doing a play here called The Whipping Man.
Called what?
The Whipping Man. And it's a play.
Is that a contemporary play?
Yes,
yeah.
By Matthew Lopez. It was done in New York City, and we were doing it here in Nashville, Tennessee, through Tennessee Rep. And it's a deep, dark play. A lot of emotions go into it. It was just draining emotionally. And in the middle of our rehearsals, Chicago the Musical came to town, the touring company, and I was invited to go watch the show. Mm-hmm. So I go to the show, and I'm watching what's going on. I was familiar with the movie with Richard Gere and Queen Latifah, won several awards, Oscars, and I enjoyed the movie. I had never seen it live, so when I went to the theatrical version of it, I was like, man, that looks like a lot of fun. Billy Flynn looks like, man.
The musical was the movie was Richard Gere, wasn't it?
Richard Gere. And John O'Hurley was doing the...
Who played it on Broadway?
Well, here was John O'Hurley. He played Billy Flynn here. He's about 6'5", big guy, baritone.
And that did win the Academy Award, I think, didn't it?
Oh, yes, it's won several awards, Tony. Yeah. It's the longest running American play.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Is it really?
In history. And I watched the play, I was captivated, and I said, wow, I would love to play the role of Billy Flynn. I mean, I would one day. And she, Kathleen O'Brien, who's the president of TPAC, heard me say that. And she says, well, can you sing? I know you can act. I've seen you act. Can you sing? And I was like, yeah, I can hold a couple notes here or there. And so, long story short, she says, well, I'll get you an audition. And I have a couple people I know in New York. And I said, okay, you do that and get back at me. And didn't think anything of it. So about 3 weeks later, she calls me back. She says, hey, I talked to the Weislers in New York, who are the producers of the show, and they know who you are as an athlete, but they don't know who you as an actor, but they're willing to have you come up to New York to audition for the part of Billy Flynn. And I'm like, in New York? Like, go up to New York? He says, yeah, go to New York and sing and do all this. Sing out loud? Like, yeah, sing. So I was like, oh God. I said, okay, I'll do it. So I got off the phone, I'm all excited. I said, oh my God, I got 3 weeks at that time to get prepared to do the show. And I hadn't seen the songs in about a year and a half, 2 years. And I'm like, oh man, this is going to be interesting. So I get my songs together. I go up to New York in November of 2014. And I go to the Ambassador Theater on Broadway, go on a stage much like this, and the lights are dim, and no one's in the audience. And the piano player comes out, and he gets on the piano. He says, all right, we're going to start from the top. All I care about is love. And what key are you in? And I'm like, key? I said, just pick one. We'll figure it out. So we figured out which key I was going to do it in. And I was nervous as hell, but you know what I said? No matter what, I'm just going to go all out. I'm going to leave it all out there. And one way or another is going to make a great story. So about an hour of doing the songs and going through the different acting pieces, the dialogue between the actors and the actresses, Barry Weisser comes down, sitting around, is clapping. Oh my God, that was fantastic. Let's do it. And walks out the theater. I said, what? I said, what? I'm going to be on Broadway? This is amazing. I said, God. I'm like, so when are we going to do it? He says, my people will get in touch with your people. Okay. And that person did not get in touch with me until a year later. Until after that. But at that point, I was ready. I continued to do the songs. I did it in New York City in 2016.
At the Ambassador?
At the Ambassador Theater for 8 weeks.
I wish I'd known you then.
Yeah. My wife came up, and my first show, I had my friends in the audience. My wife was there. My sons were there. And my wife, like I said, she's the singer in the family. After my show, she comes backstage, and she comes up, and there are tears in her eyes. And I'm like, oh my God, it was that bad? Oh, it was that bad? She's like, no, I'm so proud of you. You did such a great job. And when she said that, I said, yes, all the pressure's off. As long as I can satisfy her, because she's a tough critic. She will tell me, oh, you suck. I mean, you absolutely suck. You need to work on X, Y, and Z. And oh, don't forget to drop your jaw on your big. I mean, every little thing, I hate it, but you know, that's my biggest critique.
What did you find the most difficult adjustment was as far as being an actor? What was more difficult, learning lines or? You know
what? It's not the learning of the lines. It's the intention behind the lines.
The what?
It's the intention. Like,
tell me that again. I'm interested in that word.
The intention?
Intention.
Oh, absolutely. Everything you do on stage, there's an intent. You're trying to achieve something. You always have a goal in mind. You're not on stage just to be out there just to deliver lines. You're out there to accomplish something, or to move something, or to inspire someone, or to demean somebody.
Has that got something to do with feeling?
Oh yes, a great deal of it, feelings, emotions. So for me, in the beginning, it was learning to be vulnerable on stage and be willing to be honest on stage. You mentioned truth and honesty in your work. Well, much like what I've learned as an actor, it's not so much the lines, it's being honest. It's living truthfully under imaginary circumstances. You know, that's so interesting. Years ago, the Royal Shakespeare Company, one of us put him to sleep. I don't know if it was your conversation or mine. The Royal Shakespeare Company was doing a play in New York. They were all young people. And they came to New York, and I told you about the Players Club. And we had to entertain them, salute them, so to speak. And they came down to the club, and because I was art chairman, I was part of the greeting group. And I said to the young people, they were all under 30, I said, do you like any of our American actors? And the cast, almost to a man, said, oh yeah, we love Cagney. We love Jimmy Cagney. And I said, what is it you like about Cagney? They said his honesty, his absolute honesty as a performer. And I think it does come across, as it does with an artist. I feel that honesty is a very important part. For instance, if you go to a museum and you look at a painting,
the chances are you don't know who the subject was, but something arrests you, something, what is that magic in an actor that it can feel, and you must be able to, I was mentioning, forgive me, I'm digressing. I was mentioning to Eddie that years ago when I was painting Katharine Hepburn, she was performing in what was to be her last play. And I was going to see the preview. And I did, and I thought she was wonderful. And I went backstage and I said, Miss Hepburn, you were absolutely terrific. Oh, no, she said. Didn't work. When you see it again, you'll see the difference. Well, she was learning her lines and getting to feel with. So part of my question is, how much does the audience reaction hit you as a performer? In other words, if they react to certain things, do you find if you're doing a song and suddenly it doesn't click the way you, does that tell you something about your performance? Or, is that a fair question?
Oh, absolutely. It's different. I've done straight plays, and I've done the musical, and like for instance, last year I did A Raisin in the Sun at New York at the Nashville Repertory Theater, and every audience was different. We did it for high school kids, we did it for adults, and the responses at different points at different times of the play were completely different. And information, you know, for me, at certain times, I really wouldn't know what I was saying as the actor. Like you said, you're learning the lines, but it'll hit the audience in a way like, oh, okay, that's what
that tells you something.
Right. So every night, every time you do it, it's always something. You have to be open to learn something new about the play or about what's going on, because there's so much more meat on the bone than just learning the lines and just delivering the play and going through your blocking and doing the same thing every single time. You have to almost, which is scary in a sense, divorce yourself of the lines and just be. And that's really scary, because there'll be moments when I'm on the stage like, oh shit, what are my lines? Like, I know it starts with what you know, but then it'll hit you, and that's the most scariest thing, is to not know your lines on stage, and that's happened.
Did it ever happen where you dropped?
Like my first play here in town, oh God, it was so bad. I was doing God's Trombones. It was James Weldon Johnson. It was the ensemble, and it was the creation. And every actor had a certain piece that they would do. And mine was, and God himself stepped down with the sun in his right hand, the moon in his left, the stars clustered above his head, and the earth under his feet, and God walked where he trode, hallowed the valleys out and bulged the mountains up. That's what I was supposed to say. Yeah. And I just remember there was a lot going on stage. There was drums, it was music, it was dancers, it was streamers, it was someone representing the world, the sun, the moon, all these things. And here I am, you know, first time on stage, and you know, every actor had to go down and deliver these lines, and it was finally for me to come down stage, center stage, and deliver my lines, and I did just that. And as soon as I got to center stage, I felt the heat of the lights. I could make out faces in the crowd. I could see my wife sitting there looking at you acting now. Let's hear it, Mr. Shakespeare. Let's hear this. and I opened my mouth and I said, and God himself stepped down with the sun in his right hand, the moon in his left. Everything was going smooth. And I said, the wind is blowing. The grass is green. The animals are in the pasture. And God said, that's good, and walked off the stage. The audience didn't know. The other cast members do, and they're chuckling, giggling, or whatever. And I'm freaking out, like, oh, I just bombed. It was terrible. Oh my God, it was. I'll never get on stage again. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, that's it. I've got my acting fixed, and that was it. But it was something calling me back, like, to conquer that fear and to feel comfortable in my skin and to let go. And I haven't looked back since. I have not looked back since.
What do you like about playing this part? Billy Flynn.
Oh, Billy? Ooh, Billy's fun.
You wanted to play this.
Yeah, I did. I mean, it's because, you know what, I'm out of my comfort zone. I'm not I'm not a natural singer. And it was challenging for me to get out and sing out loud in front of people and be taken serious. But you know what, I learned that even if I crack a note, it doesn't matter.
Even what? I'm sorry.
Even if I crack a note or I mess up, it doesn't matter because it's about the character, the energy of the character. And he never loses, which I don't. He's a ladies' man, you know, which I used to be, young for one, yeah. He's suave, he can be cunning. He's all those things, and it's a role that I really have enjoyed to embrace. And every time I go out there on stage to do it, it's something, again, new that I learn about him, the play, the people that I'm interacting with, the relationships that are developed.
Now, how many more times will you do it, do you think? I'm sorry, how was the run of Chicago?
Oh, wow. I just did one in Columbus, Ohio, which went very well for a week. And
you are taking it to New Haven for how many performances?
Between Reading and New Haven over a week period, so it'll be a split week. So over 5 days, we'll be in 2 different cities. Then I will, in the fall, I'll do Detroit, and I'll do Dallas, Toronto this summer, and I'll do Chicago in 2019. So, yeah, it's a lot of fun.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Tell me about I'm very interested in your interest in Shakespeare. I was mentioning to Eddie that when I was commissioned to paint the portrait of Chris Plummer, he said to me, "How do you want to paint me?" And I said, "I'm really not sure." And at that time, he was doing a lot of Broadway, and he was also doing The Tempest. And it was going to be up in Toronto. And we went up there. It was actually an easy trip. And I saw him, the essence of it was I saw him playing Prospero, and at one point he came out on the stage, because, you know, he at one point was a leading man, he was good looking, he was a character actor. He was also, if you don't know it, was the oldest actor ever to win an Academy Award at the age of 88. And I went up, because so much, and the reason I asked you about the word feeling, how much it had to do with it, I find as a painter, feeling has got everything to do with, you know, as I begin to see you, suddenly now I'm beginning ideas of how I'd like to paint you, because I'm getting a sense of you. It's not my role to, as I see it, to judge. That someone say he liked him or he didn't like him. I basically feel as an actor, I like the part and my role is to perform.
Yeah.
And when I saw him do Prospero, he came out, Eddie, at one point with the staff, and he looked up at the sky, and there was something that really appealed to me, the feeling of what he was, and I thought, that's my portrait.
Yeah.
And so that's what I go about, and I would think as an actor, that becomes a very, very important part of what feeling is. Is it not, for instance, with Hamlet? I've seen Hamlet, I think, really perform possibly 12 different actors.
Yeah.
And very different interpretations. And I was mentioning to Eddie, at one point Chris Plummer was saying to me, because he had played Hamlet as a young man in England, and he said, you know, at the age of 85, I guess he was at the time, he said, "I really think I understand the role now, but I'm too old for it." But I don't know what appealed to you about Hamlet, about wanting to do it, and that's really my question. What makes you suddenly want to do Hamlet?
Not so much. I guess it would be Richard III.
Richard
That's what I would like to do. But Hamlet is one that I fell in love with Shakespeare through Hamlet. And over the years, you know, I would read Richard III because one, if you guys are familiar with the play, he has a deformity that, you know, from a physical standpoint, I have yet to do anything that I would have to portray that. He operates in darkness. which, you know, I like to think I operate in the light and the good of people
Yeah.
and so forth, and that'll be interesting to play that. And, you know, as an actor, you really can't judge the person that you're playing. You know, you have to find those things that allow him to be human and almost justifies his actions. You have to operate from, I guess, from that perspective, and I haven't really delved into the text. Sorry about that.
You missed me.
Is he operates from his ego.
Operation what?
He operates from his ego. And you can do that and you know, achieve certain things and accomplish certain things, but in the end, it's all self-driven. And
This is a little off the subject.
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting you. When you do the reading of Richard III, do you do it in costume? Or
no, we won't do it in costume. It'll probably be in all black. You know,
What do you do, for instance, as I remember the character of Richard III, he has a hunchback.
Yes.
And this, of course, is a very important part psychologically, is it not, of his...
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
What do you do about that? Do you actually
I don't
bend
know
your
yet.
body a bit?
You know what? I will find something. I'll look at, you know, what inspires me, which is interesting about this whole thing, is that it's not so much what builds a character for me. It's what the words say about him. It's what the other characters say about him. It's what the writer says about the character within the play. But then, as an actor, for me, you know, I like to work from the inside out and also from the outside in. So
That's a very interesting comment.
yeah,
No,
yeah.
it
I
is.
do both ways. So
You work both ways,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
See, I find that as a painter, that happens to me. I'm working now from the outside in, but basically I would like to work from the inside
Inside
out
out.
and push it out.
right.
Yeah.
So a painting or a picture or an image of something, it doesn't have to be a person with a deformity or something that hinders them, will inspire me to operate in a certain way. Like, you know, for one play, like Billy Flynn, I look at lions and tigers or panthers, Black Panthers, in terms of movement, how they move, and how they walk, how they prance, how they look, because that's how he is. He's almost stealth and sexy.
You know, I remember there was an actor, John Barrymore, and he had been a leading man, matinee idol, great-looking guy, I mean, handsome. And he decided at the age of 40 he wanted to do Shakespeare. And he remarked that he had gone with a playwright, and the playwright had shown him, they went to somewhere to where, not reptiles, but insects, and they said they saw a tarantula, you know, the spider with the...
Yeah.
And Barrymore said, that's how Richard III should be played.
Exactly.
Like a tarantula.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I got that. If you see me and Richard III acting like a tarantula, you know where you got.
Would you like to
Thank you
paint
for
for
that.
a while?
Yeah. But I'll take that and put it in my back pocket.
That wasn't bad. No, it made sense to me.
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's...
Are you okay up there? You're not tired or...
What's that?
You're not tired or anything, are you?
Right now?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely not.
I'm exhausted.
Oh, you're the one doing all the working. And someone else is exhausted as well, too. As you can. She's found her home.
When do you do the Richard III?
That won't happen until October, sometime in October, November.
Where do you do it?
It'll be at a venue here in Tennessee.
In Tennessee?
Yes, sir, here in Nashville. And that's where I've done a lot of my work on stage.
Yeah.
Based out of here, yes, sir. How's it coming?
Looks just like me.
Does it?
You're fine.
Good.
Tell me about your son in the football.
Yeah, my son Jair.
Tell me who he's playing for again.
He plays here at Vanderbilt.
For Vanderbilt.
Yes, sir. He's been here for going on his 4th year, redshirt junior. And like again, he turns 21 today. Yeah, spring game
Yeah.
is today. I don't know how.
I'm sorry, what position is he playing?
Plays running back. I don't know where he got that from. I have no idea.
Is he your size?
He's a little shorter than I am, but at that
Like
age,
6'1", 3¼
yeah, he's about 6'1" and a quarter. Yeah, the quarter with the hair. Yeah, and he's extremely bright. Oh gosh, I mean, he has a 3-point something GPA at Vanderbilt, and he's an econ major. Just pledged a fraternity, and he's in the process of being a part of a fraternity here on campus. So he's enjoying college life, and it's a thrill to see. But he's developed. He was a late bloomer in terms of football was concerned, growing up. Didn't really play in high school until his sophomore year, and I get it. I understand it because as a father and having accomplished things that I've accomplished collegiately and professionally, he's finding his own path in his own way, and I never wanted to push the game on him in any way, like the pressure of that. So I had to allow him to find, what it is that he wanted to do, what his life passion was, what his life purpose is, and support him in that regard. And he's multifaceted, like I said.
Now, your other son, is it Eric, who's here?
Yes, Eric.
Is Eric interested in football? Or maybe I should ask him.
Are you interested in football?
What did he say?
He says very. Yeah.
That means yes.
He's interesting. He was born after I finished playing football.
Oh, really?
Yes, and I never pushed the game on him at all. And somehow or another, he just picked up on...
We're talking about Eric? Or
Eric.
Eric.
He picked up on the love of the game. I mean, he would do the exact same things I would do as a 3-year-old, 2-year-old, find anything, whether it was like bread ties that you tie around the bread, and play football with them. And he was doing the same things. I'm like, oh my God, he's like me in that regard. He loves the game of football. And he's never seen me play a down of football. Didn't really have a concept of it until he was maybe 3 or 4 years old. And he says, hey, you're Eddie George. Because the kids at his daycare they would call me Go-Go, which I had no idea what that meant. And they figured out who I was, I guess, from their parents. And then he kind of looked at me the same way. And instead of, I'm thinking he's going to be in awe, he says to me, Eric, he's like, yeah, I'm going to break every one of your records one day. So he's his own man, but he loves football. He loves it. He breathes it. He watches. He studies it. He's on YouTube. He looks at all the old plays. I mean, like he's Earl Campbell or Herschel Walker, George Rogers, some of the greats, Archie Griffin. He's quite the student of the game.
When you were playing football, did you ever think in terms of what you would do or when you would do it if you finished football?
That's a great question. Yes and no. I grew up in Philadelphia, and I went to a high school there, Abington. And long story short, I wasn't doing well in high school academically, and my mom sent me to Fort Union military.
What did your father do?
My father was in the military.
Really?
Yeah.
Army, Navy, or?
Army. He was in the Army, and unfortunately, he had his battles with addictions, and my mom, my father were divorced at an early age. And
were you an only child?
No. My oldest sister. I had an older sister who was 4 years older than me. So we all grew up in the same household. And my mom was a single mother, and she worked various jobs to keep everything afloat. Get comfortable. I mean, get everything afloat and make sure my sister and I had the best of everything. Yeah. And with the help of my grandmother, we were raised right. But I needed guidance, especially for a young African American male, growing up in just the suburbia of Philadelphia. There were a lot of pressures to be something that was not going to have longevity in a positive way. And my mom recognized that, so at 15, she sent me to Fort Union Military Academy. And the only thing...
Sent you where?
To a Fork Union Military Academy.
And that was what, like a prep school?
Yes, yes, in the middle of nowhere. Between
Right.
Richmond and Charlottesville, sat Fork Union Military Academy, right smack in the middle. And that's why they call it Fork in the road, you know. So, and I learned quickly that I just couldn't be a football player. It just wasn't enough.
Now you're talking about what age?
At 15.
And how big were you physically then?
Then I was about 6 foot, 168 pounds.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was a scrawny kid.
yeah.
Yeah, scrawny. Then I grew. I got bigger while I was at Fork Union. But I was able to see life differently then.
In what way?
Of the importance of my education.
Okay. What did you think you would pursue at that age?
Education-wise?
Yeah, in other words, when you were at prep school, were you thinking of a profession?
Before prep school, no, it was football.
Which is-
and that was it.
oh.
Yeah, I mean, it was just
Yeah.
football, and I figure it out then. I mean, it was more or less, passing than I was excited about. If I got a D in anything, it was a great day. If a C, my God, it was a party being thrown. Forget A's and B's. That was like, please, I'm just trying to pass and just keep it moving.
Yeah.
But when I went to Fort Union, it was excelling. It was getting A's and B's, and I dreamt of going, not just going from Penn State to play football, but thinking of going like to Harvard or Princeton or VMI, West Point, those type of schools.
Were you thinking West Point?
Not really,
Yeah.
but I'm just thinking,
that's true.
I was just thinking along those lines.
Yeah.
After my 3 years in military school, I said, me and the military are done after this. I was done with hospital corners.
Were you in the military?
Was I in the military?
You.
It was a military-based school.
No, yeah. Okay.
So we had to do
So
everything.
they're sort of preparing you for.
Oh God, yeah. We had formation. We had
Yeah.
a uniform for everything, for pajamas, for playtime. We had fatigues. We had rifles we had to carry and do parades with. So it was hardcore, man. It was nothing to play with. And I went there for 3 years, and a lot of life lessons that have shaped me into the man that I am today, without a doubt. And I think I know that I'm rebellious in terms of being neat, because my closet is a wreck. I don't do the folding. My wife does that. I throw my stuff on the floor. And just rebellious. You laugh at that, huh? Yeah, but
When did you decide to make the step to acting?
like I said, I was after I finished playing the game of football. And
But you didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to go in the theater.
No, it just kind of
What sort of happened that made you...
Well, it was the pain of not playing football.
No, because as a painter, I remember talking to Byron Nelson, and I told him he was a legendary golfer. They told me that, he was what, I guess to golf, he and Bobby Jones, what Babe Ruth was, or Billy Mays to baseball. He told me that he just physically couldn't swing more than 60%.
Yeah.
Now, as I said, there's no reason why creatively an actor or a writer or composer, anyone in the arts, can't continue forever.
That's right.
But you see, physically, I'm forced now at the age of almost 92 to use a cane from time to time, which pisses me off. I hate that. I really
Hold
resent.
on. How old are you?
I'll be 92 in August.
What? You look great, man. 92?
Well,
That is incredible.
no, my friend Tony Bennett is 2 days older. No, it's true. No, Tony was born August 3rd, and I was born August 5th. So I always can ask him, what's it like to be 90, or I got 2 days to go. But my point is that physically, I've been so interested in creative people, actors, and so forth. And here's Chris Plummer. He's going to be 89, and he was just nominated playing the role of Getty for the last, what was it, Greed or something? What was the movie?
All the money in the world.
Something, yeah. And there's no reason why, but I wondered, as a football player, was there an age at which you said, I've got to quit, I could see it coming? I can't do what.
Well, I've always thought that I could play until I was 45. I'll be 45 this year.
Hey,
But,
you have to be my son.
right. But it happens a lot sooner than you think, and it never ends well. You know, unless you're Tom Brady. The NFL stands for not for long. I don't stand for the National Football League. It's not for long. And
What is the normal age a football professional would quit?
oh God, the average year for a football player is
35?
3. Yeah, well, it's 3 years you're in. I mean, that's the average that you're in and you're out. But some guys make it long. Even when you retire at at 39, 40, you still have a long life to live.
Oh,
And-
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and money doesn't necessarily solve all your issues. You know, it
Well,
doesn't.
that's why I
doesn't
was
replace
curious,
that void.
Eddie, when, did you sort of see it coming? Like, I've got 3 more years? Or,
I kind of saw it coming, like my eighth year here in Tennessee, and it was more for business on the business side than it was for the physical. I felt like physically I could still do some things. Certainly not be as physical as I was early in my younger days, but as a savvy veteran, I can pick and choose my spots of when to be aggressive, when not to be aggressive, when to pull back, when to take a hit, when not to deliver a hit, and so forth, to give myself longevity. But I could see change in the air around that time. And it was
could
like,
you give me an example?
yeah, when they draft a kid that's 22 and they're at the same position. That's the example. You're
That's a
at
pretty good
27,
question.
28, he's 22. It's like, okay, all right, you got some competition.
Yeah.
And guess who they want to win, you know? Because at that time, you're making, at that time I was making $8 million a year. And he was making roughly, $500,000. So
Yeah.
he's cheaper, younger,
yeah.
right? You know how that whole thing works. So I knew that time was coming, and I was prepared to make a shift in my salary, but I wasn't prepared to make a shift in my career at that point in time. I wasn't ready to step away or step down. I felt like I had a lot more to give as a football player, and
This is probably a dumb question, or not dumb, but it may not be very sensible. At what point did you really say, I know I'm finished next year?
Oh man, well it was at a practice in Dallas. I went to Dallas my last year. You know Bill Parcells?
No,
You know of Bill Parcells?
no.
Does anybody in here know of Bill Parcells?
Tell me the name again.
Bill Parcells. He's
Well,
a Hall of Fame coach.
I've heard the name. But,
Yeah, well, he coached in the
Okay.
Giants for a
Yeah.
while, and the Patriots, Jets. I mean, he's known to be a hard-nosed kind of guy. And he was the head coach for Dallas, and we were having a horrible year. I think we won maybe 4 or 5 games, and it was like maybe late in the year, November, October, somewhere around there, and we're clearly not going anywhere. And I was on the scout team for the Cowboys. Now, the scout team is when you're basically a dummy for the starters.
Okay.
So I'm running plays of the opponents that we're going to play. I'm playing, like, if we're playing the Redskins, the Redskins running back. So that means I'm not going to get any time. I'm basically a look for what they're going to get for Sunday. And at that point, I accepted my role. But I remember I was in the huddle, and Tony Romo was the quarterback at the time. He was a third-string quarterback, and we're running live goal line. And that means live practice. You're taking each other down. It's like a game. It's a real game. And I remember thinking to myself as he's delivering the play, like, damn, I won a Heisman Trophy. I was a 4-time Pro Bowler. I was a face of a franchise, running down all of my accomplishments. And I said, I'm reduced to this, to a scout team running back. I am a dummy for the Dallas Cowboys. And they break for the play, and I missed the play. I didn't know which way to go. I said, oh, shit, here we go. So I said, I'm a savvy veteran. I'll figure it out. If he opens up right, I'll go right. If he opens up left, I'll go left. So he opens up left, I go right, and Bill Parcells says, George, get the hell off my football field. That's when I knew my career was done. Yeah. If I knew, if I got kicked off the scout team, then that was pretty much it.
You know, I'd forgotten this about, it must be 30 years ago. I'm not very good on dates, but I remember being invited out to Dallas to do a demonstration for the Texas Art League, and being a little brighter than you think I am, I said, get me somebody with a name that'll bring an audience in. And they said, we've got a fellow named Danny White.
Oh, yeah.
Does that name mean something to you?
Yeah, quarterback. Yep.
Well, see, I grew up in New York, and baseball was my thing. DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays. And football was the New York Giants, but I was about my height at 16, and baseball was for me and not football. So I followed, which I still do, baseball mainly. And I went out, and they had Danny White, and I'd never heard of him. But of course, it brought, as you did, in a terrific crowd of people, not to see me, but to see Danny White. But as I remember, he was the quarterback for when I said I'd never painted many sports figures, I didn't. But Danny White, I guess, was the first one I ever painted. And he would be probably, if that was 30 years ago, he would probably be 60 now or something. Is that right?
Yes,
but
sir.
You remember the name?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Danny's a great guy. I've got a question for you.
Beg pardon?
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
What is the secret to, I guess, having a long, beautiful, fulfilling life? I mean, I would not have...
A lot of sex and drinking.
Hey, Did you hear that?
And we didn't even rehearse.
No, we didn't. Eric, cover your ears when you...
I'm sorry.
If we did, okay.
I'm sorry, Eric. Don't pay any attention.
Wow.
What's your next question?
What you drink? What was your choice to drink?
No, you know, last night, Eric, a lady came over. I had just published a book. And there was a young man with her. He must have been, how old are you? 45. Well, he was about 15 or 16. And he said, and some of you who were here last night, pardon me for repeating it, but he said to me, can you write something in there that's got some good advice? And what I wrote is, I said, when I was 15 and about to leave high school to become a cartoonist, my father said to me, you're a lucky young man, you're going to be able to earn your living doing something you enjoy. Don't ever forget it. That's the advice I would give, right there.
Yeah.
If you can find I've met, as I'm sure you have, a lot of shakers and movers. I mean, multi. And I've told them that story, and you know, most every one of them said, yeah, that's as close to heaven as you can get. So if you enjoy acting, enjoy playing football, you got it.
I can't play football.
Is somebody watching the time? Yes. Now I'm going to tell you something, and I thank you so much. What I would like to do is how do I feel about it? Now I'd like you all to leave and let me get to work. No, I'm really serious, because now I suddenly begin to see things I want to do, and I would like Peggy to take a shot of you just as you are, because what I want to do with this is to, when it's dry, bring it back to New York and then basically finish it up and send it to you, and you do what you want. You can touch it up. I'll send you some brushes.
All right, that's fine. Philly and I'll do it.
Let him chew on. We'll put some dog food on it. Because I really feel that you've been great, and I appreciate. But as your son, 21-year-old son, the birthday today, and he's playing football at 4 o'clock, you get out of here.
All right, man, I appreciate it.
So would somebody come up, or Shane, and maybe take a couple of shots, just as you're looking at me, and then what I thought we'd do, for those of you who are still interested, I'll take some questions. If you get behind me, Peggy, right from here. Right, see the arrow right there.
Got it.
And I thank you so much, Eddie, for doing this.
and take a bunch of them so you can pick.
This is my current wife.
A lot of sex and drinking, huh? Okay, yeah.
Did you get all the pictures? Yeah. Shane, did you want to take one or two for me? And if you could just get Eddie from the angle I'm painting him at. I do thank you so much for doing
No,
this.
it's been an honor, honestly.
I'll get some more, sweetie. You were afraid I didn't get enough.
That's your wife? That's your wife?
Huh?
That's really your wife?
Which one are you?
Oh,
Which one? I just can't think of her name. Yeah, that's my current wife, Eddie.
Oh, man. I
Anyway,
thought
thank you. I'm ready to let you go.
All right, there you go.
Except that you were just great.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll leave you until I get your address from.
Oh, yeah, we can do this.
No, just let him drop you a note.
Absolutely, man.
Thank you so much. Hey, you were just great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just asked him if he'd like a 92-year-old running back. No good?
Yeah, you'd be great. Until you run into
Thank
Ray
you.
Lewis, but.
Thank you, pal. And thank you, Taj and Eric, for letting your dad come over here. It's just, I'll be glad to take any, what I told Eddie was that he's going to send me his address. I'm going to finish this up, and now I get to work on it. But anyway, this is basically the way I start. A picture, and if any of you have, I'm going to get my cap if you don't mind. If you have any questions, yeah, would you please? Thank you, Eddie, so much, and the George family for. You know, I was telling Eddie before, and I would hate to think I operate on different levels, but I think I mentioned this last night. Hey, good luck with your son. He, by the way, is an idea to me of a perfect kind of model because he's animated, and I was saying that one person like myself gets an audience who's interested in painting, not interested in personalities, and they want to know about the canvas, the brush, the light, so on. Then you get another group of people who want to know about what it was like to paint John Wayne or Ronald Reagan. Then you get a group that has both, and it's kind of hard to keep the mixture going. But if any of you have any kind of questions that you would like to ask me, I would like to. And as I said, what I'm going to do with this now is when it dries, I think what's very important for me is this, apropos of photographs, and I think those of you who are non-painters, I think this will make sense to you. One of the things I asked him, and remember he picked up the word feeling, how much feeling has got to do with a picture. And if you think about it, if you go to a museum or a collection and you see portraits, you really don't know if they look like the person. Something appeals to you in the portrait. And so I think when he also talked about the word as an actor, honesty, somewhere I will go back with a recollection of him which I would not have ever gotten from a photograph, ever. Because I'll remember him far better when I go back and say, because photographs can be deceptive and misleading. And I found this that, let me tell you one quick story which is totally true. When John Wayne's portrait came up to be painted, I found that friends of mine who liked me and liked my work were not very happy because they all wanted that portrait commission, particularly the artists out west that were basically saying, well, you know, Kinstler's a New York artist and it should go to an Oklahoma or a Wyoming artist. And happily, the director of the museum and a few people there felt I was the guy for the portrait, and I did it. I felt I could do it. I really wanted that part. It was a lot to do with the pulp westerns I had done. It had a lot to do with the fact that I had grown up in the movies, with the movies. And I went out to see Mr. Wayne, which was really an extraordinary experience. And I came back with a definite feeling about him. I told you the story about the hands on the... All of this had meaning to me, just as when he sat, and I noticed when he smiled, little things how I thought, that's what I want to go after, that's what I want to get. Am I happy with this? No, it's a start. But I know now the direction I'd like to go in, and hopefully the pictures will pick up some of that, but I've got the groundwork for it here. What the point of my story is this, and for those of you who are painters, this will make sense to you. I was working on the portrait of John Wayne, of which there are 3 studies in the exhibition here. And I must confess to you, as I was finishing it, I began to get really, which is not like me, really uptight. Maybe this isn't right, and maybe... There was nobody coming to see it. I was just told that when I finished it, I was going to send it out to Oakland. He wanted to see it first. There was no way with his cancer and his schedule he was going to come east. So I knew I was going to have to send it out for him to look at with his family and God knows who. And I frankly always like to be around when one of my victims sees a portrait, because then you can qualify. And then we say, well, I think the mouth is wrong. And I said, wait a minute. Whereas if you send it out, I promise you, and some of you sadly know this, they'll show the portrait to their wife or a cousin or the delivery person, and they'll say, I wonder about the mouth. And then he'll say to the next person, someone saw it and thinks the mouth might, oh, you know, they may be right, but you know, what about the... And so by the time you get there, there's no time to defend yourself, whereas when you're there, you can ask them, please qualify what you mean. Well, I will admit to you that I got really considerably uptight, because suddenly I was learning that every artist I knew, Shane, wanted that commission. And I began to examine it, and I began to look at a sketch like the ones you have in the show. And I did something then I had really never done before. I took measurements. And I found the mouth was off, I thought, by 1/4 inch, which is enormous. The eyes were smaller in life than in my painting. And in short, as I looked at my painting compared to the pictures of him, I was way off. Well, I'm not religious, but I'll tell you, if someone was looking over me up there or down below, said, leave it alone, I sent it out to Wayne, and they did exactly what I asked them not to do. I said, please wait till I get there, and the first thing I knew, it had been opened and examined before I got there. Well, fortunately, as happens sometimes in life, the gods shine on you, and he came walking across his home in Newport Beach. I remember there were octagonal squares or tiles, sort of orangey red, and he was wearing just beach stuff, meaning suntans, and he pointed out with his hand like that, and he said to me, I really like it, but you got the bracelet on the wrong wrist. Well, no, but I had noticed in life he was wearing a copper bracelet here, and it spilled over into, what was the movie, Katie Elder and Her Sons or something, where he played with Dean Martin, but he kept wearing the copper bracelet. Well, it was on his right wrist, so that means it was painted over here, and he saw it and wore it. I don't make those mistakes. I was really quite correct. I had it on the right hand, and he thought it was the left because... And I had left the portrait alone. For some reason I thought, I don't know, it's not accurate, but something felt right. And that leads me to one final story. But his son, Michael Wayne, who I'll tell you was one son of a bitch, tough. He was really very difficult to deal with. And he called me one day and he said to me, you have gotten the quintessential image of my father. Now the reason I tell this to you, and particularly the painters, is when I asked him about the feeling, if you remember the feeling of a role, that's what's important. And I think if the portrait worked, it felt like him without being accurate. And the reason I tell you that story is about 3 or 4 years ago, Tony Bennett was recording on the West Side in Manhattan with a 102-piece orchestra an album, I think it was called For the Ladies, and he had done a Duke Ellington number, and I was in a booth, and his son, with his son who was doing the mixing, and this 102-piece orchestra in a room, it honestly was easily as big as this. And Tony was in a booth up in the corner, and he sang Sophisticated Lady, and I looked over at Danny when he got through. I said, wow. And the orchestra leader took his baton like this. The violinist went, mama. And we heard Tony's voice come over the speaker, and he said, could we try it again? And I looked at Danny and said, what was the matter with it? And so when Tony came off stage, and the beauty was his answer was like that. I said, Tony, when you redid it, I didn't notice anything different. Did you hear something you didn't like in the first recording? And he looked at me like a little boy and he said, no, it's something I didn't hear. The reason that story has such meaning to me is you've got to, I believe as a painter, and that's really where I do come from, you've got to trust that little voice. If something tells you it's right. By the same token, I've had pictures, and Peggy knows this, that she'll say to me, why are you so worried about that? And I said, something doesn't feel right. And it will be pointed out that Shane liked it, and Dawn liked it, and this one liked it, Holly liked it. Doesn't feel right. Trust your instincts. You have to. With that in mind, and that discourse, do you have any questions that, sir?
Do you like to do the painting in a person's home environment or work environment?
That's a wonderful question, and I wish I could answer it. No, I will answer it. As I've gotten older, I'm terribly troubled about repeating myself. And so I found when I looked through a lot of my early work, I was beginning to do the same thing, and it became repetitious. So in recent years, I have made a point of saying, I'd like to come to your office, and I'll go in there and I'll see some little something that'll have meaning to me, a meaning to them. Or a businessman, let's say, I see out of his window the skyline of New York. When I was painting General Dunford for the Marine Corps just 2 months ago, I noticed a lot, because I had painted some other Marine Corps commandants, I noticed there were maps a great deal in his office, so I worked the map into it. I think there's a great danger for those of you who are painters in getting, I can see why Sargent said no more portraits at 50. You begin to repeat yourself, you're not stimulated, and I think you need it. As a matter of fact, I told Eddie, I said, I love the theater, but I don't think I'd be a very good actor, because I think if I had to do the same performance night after night, I would be really bored. Every painting to me is different, and the answer to your question is yes, it has a great meaning to me, and very often, I just finished a painting in New York of a man, and the background's totally blank, nothing, just a plain canvas, like this. Because that's all I wanted to say more about him. On other cases, I painted a woman a couple of months ago named Drew Faust, who's president of Harvard. And I had painted some portraits for them before, and I did not want to repeat myself. And that's part of it too, that I look at my work, and if I know I'm going to have other pictures there, I don't want them to look like rubber stamps. Something you may not know about, but the itinerant painters in this country in the 1840s and 50s would paint up the portraits of people before they were commissioned. They did them complete, but there were no faces. And so they would go to Joseph Mella and say, which of these portraits would you like your... And that's why so many of those itinerant paintings that go out through New England and the South were all pretty much the same, because you just pick the pose and they put your face in on it. So I feel creatively that is a very individual journey. But for me, I am restless. And you may say, with this, what are you going to... Well, obviously on a smaller painting, I'm going to do less. If you look at my show, I think there were 3 or 4 paintings, like the one of Alexander Calder, Paul Jenkins, that are in their studio. So I think it depends a little bit on being a playwright or an actor and what you want to... What do you want to say about the person? I think I tried to make my point yesterday. It is not my role to judge. If when I finish this, you say, I don't think you liked him, or you do like him, you're doing me an injustice. Of course you liked him. Why could you not like him? But am I trying to say that in the portrait? No, I'm looking for something that might be characteristics that you'd say, oh, that's Eddie George. Anyway, I don't know how well I've answered it, but Yes.
As an amateur artist, I have a question for you. You have been very successful in painting from in very young age, as I saw. I want to know which one has been more important in your success, you think? Your genuine talent or your training and perseverance?
Could you maybe translate, repeat? I couldn't hear too well. Huh?
Hard work or talent? What's meant more to you? Hard work or talent?
What, hard work or talent?
Hard
What?
work or talent? Which meant more to you?
Hard work
Which meant more to
and
me?
training
Oh,
has been more important, or your talent?
Which do I place more importance on?
Yes, in
Oh,
your
I
success.
think there's no substitute for hard work, period. I can think of so many people when I was in my teens in art school and who were working with me, who had a great deal of talent, but it went nowhere. I have seen young artists, and I have said to friends of mine, they're not going to go anywhere because there was no curiosity, there was no work ethic, and a great deal of it with art, sure, it's talent. And one thing that's never talked about much with artists is this little brain. But the artists that I have liked and have enjoyed have been intelligent people. Do I mean educated? Self-educated. Because it never ends. You don't get a degree at a certain age that you've made it. There's no end to it. And so I believe in talent, but I believe that talent must be nurtured. It must never be left unguarded. It's really, I'm not going to get into politics, it's like liberty and democracy. It's a responsibility, and every generation has got to reinforce it, revive it, believe in it, and I think that talent is something that is God-given, but the number of people that I have seen who I can think of them, that I was in school with, were so brilliant. And what they did, I watched it with a lot of artists, they never grew past the age of 20. It's something, and you must be intrigued with this, to watch the growth of an artist and how every generation, I mean, Sargent is a great believer, a great example and stimulant to me of an artist who was always restless. I knew an actor years ago, Alfred Drake, who made a great success at the age of 22 in Oklahoma. And then he got bored and restless with it, so they did Kismet, bigger success. And that became so successful that Cole Porter wrote Kiss Me Kate for him, bigger success. And by the age of 30, he was sort of burned out and never moved beyond that. And it fascinates me with composers and writers how they can continue to be fresh and new. And so I don't know how well I've answered it, but I think they go hand in hand. But I believe absolutely, passionately, that hard work there is no substitute for. In anything you do well, you talk to, I've known a lot of actors, and the good ones are the ones who still kept learning. Like there was no end to it. Every part was a new part. Every novel was a new novel. And there are others who kind of coast, just doing what they did before. They found a comfortable niche. Am I critical of it? No. To me, they do it this way, I do it that way. But that's the best answer I can give you. Anybody? By the way, I want you all to be conscious of the time. It's 4:20. I learned from somebody said, always leave them laughing. So when it's time to go, let's just, that's what I say, if you've got any questions that relate.
Okay. I was wondering if you can tell us any of your experience with Sargent that you still see in your current experience today.
Sir, could you repeat that?
If there was anything that you experienced in your training with Sargent that you still see in your life today.
Shane, what does that mean exactly?
Just know about that influence of Sargent since your early years. Are you still using that today? Or
well, thank you for that. I think I told you, some of you who were here last night, that I tremendously valued, and I really hope it's true, that several years ago someone in introducing me turned to me and said, meaning me, this guy never took his eye off the past. I don't think there's a painting I work on, landscape, watercolor, illustration, portrait, that I don't think, wait a minute, and I go back and I look at France Hall's. I think, well, now, how did Sargent treat that water? And how did Vuillard do that? And I was doing an interior recently, and I became absolutely enamored and remembering Vuillard and those wonderful interiors of broken color. So it's not just Sargent, it's really the painters I have loved and admired. They're a constant source of inspiration. That's the best way I can. Does that help? Anyway.
Yoo-hoo. I have a technical question. Over here. Over here.
Oh, hello. Hello. What are you all doing in my living room?
This might be a little boring to most people, but do you work with medium or solvents?
Oh, no, I love those questions. I've got here a little that Shane uses too, a little liquid. And for something like a sketch, starting in, I want it to dry fairly quickly. I might not use as much of it in the studio on something larger. But basically, I do use liquid or some kind of oil. Yes, I do use a medium. And it depends on how much I overpaint, how many days I spend on it, how much I varnish it along the way. That becomes a very much, don't you think, an individual problem.
How long will it take you to finish that painting?
20, 30 years. I wish you a long life. No, let me answer that. I don't have any perspective. You see, when I turned around to you, and you know I said this affectionately but totally truthfully, I wish you'd all leave us and let me now get into the painting. The reason I don't really, please understand this, I hope this comes across from my heart the way I mean it. I love to perform. I think they said once about actors, they're like ham. You don't kill them, you cure them. And I like performing, but I also value my privacy. And if I'm before an audience, I'm doing this for you. But I like to work by myself with my client. And when I get this back home, I will see it with perspective that I don't have right now. And that's why when I get the pictures back, I think probably, well, I think for those of you who are painters, I think my color values as far as flesh and relationships, I know he has a dark jacket, a white shirt, and he is Afro-American, a medium complexion Afro-American. So I'll get the pictures back and I'll work towards a certain expression. For instance, when he smiles, he's got a really sweet, boyish smile, which I don't have here yet, but I know where it is. I can feel it. So when I get the pictures back, I would think that probably if they what I think they are, if I start at 9 o'clock, I think by late that afternoon I will have had it in focus. And probably I won't do much more than finish the area you see. I probably will not introduce a background because certain things I take as studies, other things I take, I'm trying to think of things I've got in the show, but there's a head of Miss Hepburn that was taken all the way. There's another sketch in there of somebody else where it was not quite finished, but I said what I wanted to. A part of it becomes emotional for me when I feel I think I've said what I want to say. Could I improve it? Sure, but I like it this way. That's where I say you have to trust your little voice. To answer your question, I think I can do what I want to do in the better part of a day. I've got the nuts and bolts and the structure, and now I think it's a matter of going back and sharpening the details. Sir.
So I was that 16-year-old that talked to you last night, actually 27, but what's been your biggest struggle as a portrait artist?
I'm sorry?
What's been your biggest struggle as a portrait artist, and what have you done to overcome that?
People. What I've done is to have some kind of stomach relievers that I don't throw up. I think you have to have the hide of a rhinoceros at times. I cannot believe sometimes I tell the stories of things that have happened to me, and people say, oh, I can't believe this. And when I tell them, I don't believe them. The most extraordinary things come out of people. But Peggy pointed out something I thought was quite true. That's why I really don't enjoy these as much as I used to. I realize that all of you, and it's logical, want to see, does it look like the person? And I'm sure every one of you from the time I started said, oh, isn't he going to make the cheeks wider? Isn't he going to make the jaw this? Isn't he going to do it? I spend 80, this is if I can answer, I spend 80 hours on a portrait, generally. And you say, what in the hell do you do for 80 hours? I don't know, but I start to study ahead. It's not a matter of, that's why I told you the John Wayne story. When I lose the feeling of it being alive, then I have to go back and start to reconstruct it in my head. This sometimes means I have to start it over again. I think for those of you who are painters, I will tell you I understand exactly why Sargent and the great portrait painters said no more portraits. Because I think I mentioned last night, when I was doing illustration, inspiration to me was when the telephone rang. Mr. Kinstler, we have a job for you. I was inspired. This was my rent, this was my livelihood. This is like an actor. He got a job. The danger, and I think those of you who are not painters will understand this. I think one of the beauties of being an artist is to be able to express yourself through paint or words or music. If you have, which is why I think in a fascist, Soviet kind of state, a dictatorship, art will not flourish. And that's why, even though I'm conservative, I really believe in total freedom in the arts to express yourself. Then you get into things like taste, and that's another story. But I do think that there is a danger in painting portraits, as I've told Shane. You have clients and you're beginning to paint for them. Now, I happen to really admire Norman Rockwell a great deal. And there's a new show at the National Portrait Gallery of paintings of the presidents. And they quote Mr. Rockwell's portrait of Nixon, and Rockwell said, I will admit I tried to flatter him because I wanted to please him. So, in a sense, what you're doing when you're being commissioned is you have got a responsibility to please the client, and that can, in a very dangerous way, affect your work, your integrity. Where someone said, well, I wish you, there are so many pictures I really feel that I'm not happy about this, when I was quite young, compromised on and gave in to the client. I'm not dismissing the client, because very frankly, sometimes I come up with some wonderful points that I had totally missed, or that I'd held back. I remember I painted one man, he had a very bent nose, and so I turned him the other way so you wouldn't see it, and his wife said, but that's what I love in him. And you don't know, you're dealing, I'll tell you why. You're dealing with emotions. You were a lawyer, and if you see me holding a smoking gun, and the body's there, and the bullet through, I've got a pretty poor excuse, right? But with painting, anything goes. It's emotion. Look at some of the paintings, abstract paintings, and you think, what? Two sticks put together, this is the artist's interpretation of motherhood. Well, you can't, no, I'm serious. You can't argue it, because that's how I feel. So I think there's a great deal of difference between going by fact and being an engineer or an architect or a lawyer, and the other extreme, which is just going to paint what I feel. I'm all set. I think we've 4:30. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.